We are also here today to get feedback primarily from you guys to learn how we can best engage with the community on this project. And next, you can go next slide. Is it going? It's just slow. Okay, here we go. All right. So I'm Jennifer Navarra. I'm the program director of Zero Waste Hawai'i Island. We are started out as a small community group in 2019. We do now have fiscal sponsorship, but in our early days, we primarily focused on doing outreach at events, and we also hosted a monthly community meeting. It was through this work that really we came to understand that we need system level changes to address our waste problem here on Hawaii Island and really around the world. In the last few years, we've been particularly focused on reducing and creating systems to reuse packaging here on island. And you can go to the next slide. And there's a time lag, or is it my slow internet? So the Nopaho is a small pilot project we started last year. And this program, we're working with the locavore store to reuse beverage containers for 2 of their locally made beverages here on island. You can go to the next slide. So we're really excited. We have an expanding team now that we have some grant funding. We're able to bring an outreach coordinator on. Kule will be starting with us next week, and we're super excited about that. Ellen Okuma, she has really been the person that has spearheaded and led the Nopaho project. She's a retired librarian, and so brings a lot of research experience to our team and also a lot of community outreach and engagement. She is our community liaison. We also have a Bonner student intern from Hilo, Devin, and he is working on a project to introduce reusable containers to the Hilo cafeteria system. You can go to the next slide. So today we will be really focused on introducing some of the concepts and ideas about how reusable systems for foodware function. And the executive director of Perpetual will take on that role and really explain that. We'll then head into some breakout groups where we want to get some feedback from you guys on how we can best engage with the community on this project. And then we'll all reconvene and do some share back and talk about some next steps. We'll go to the next slide. And so now it's my pleasure to introduce Perpetual. They are a nonprofit that's working with 4 small cities within the United States, one of which is Hilo, and they're providing support to design and implement reusable systems for foodware. And I will now introduce Ellie Moss, who is the executive director of Perpetual, and let her take over. Thank you.
Thank you, Jennifer. And thank you so much for all of your leadership on this work so far. We're really excited to have this group together for this conversation today. With me from the Perpetual team on the call today is Christina Gherkin and Autumn Buford. And so all 3 of us are here to share a little bit about what Perpetual is bringing to this process to support Zero Waste Hawai'i Island in efforts to introduce a reusable foodware, but really working through a community-driven process to make sure that whatever reuse system gets established is something that's really designed by the community and for the community and to work for all members of the community. So I'll tell you a little bit about what that looks like and sort of how we've ended up doing what we're doing. I know people in this conversation are coming from lots of different backgrounds and places. I'm sure everyone is very familiar with plastic waste pollution and with the concept of reuse. And I always just like to start with sort of at a very intuitive level. I think we all know that it's a little bit insane to think about extracting natural resources, shipping them all over the world, using them for 20 minutes, and then disposing of them often in terrible ways, and even well-managed ways. It's still unfortunate waste. It just seems so much more logical to create a system where we can make things that last, use them many, many times, and avoid a lot of the waste and nonsense that goes along with disposables. When we think about different types of solutions to plastic waste and pollution problems, this chart, which some of you may find familiar, it's from a report that was done a couple of years ago called Breaking the Plastic Wave. And it looked at all the different levers that we have for addressing the plastic waste problem specifically, but I think you could also think about this as a disposable problem more generally. And what they found is that reuse is actually the single biggest lever that we have in addressing plastic waste as a problem. Recycling has a place and will be needed. Safe disposal has a place and will be needed, but reuse is really one of the most powerful levers that we have that can be good for the planet, but also really good for people. There's a lot of great opportunities that come with reuse. And that's really how when we think about why reuse is worth exploring and worth seeing how reuse can serve a community, we see a lot of different ways that reuse can benefit communities. There are economic ways that reuse can really work well as a solution to current single-use disposables. When reuse systems are set up properly, they can operate at a comparable cost, especially in a context like Hawaii, to disposables. So there's really no economic burden on businesses from adopting reusable foodware. It can be done at about the same cost. And it can actually be done in a way that reduces sourcing risk for businesses, especially since the pandemic. There's been more disruptions in the supply chain. As we've talked to many local businesses across the 4 cities that we're working with, we've heard from a lot of businesses that not only is it more expensive to get the disposables that they're used to getting, but they can't even get the ones that they want half the time, or any of the ones that would really work best for them. So having reusables circulating in a community can take some of the guesswork out of what's actually going to show up at your door in the morning when you know that you need something. It's really nice also that the money that's getting spent in a reuse system is circulating within the local community. So it's building local economic development as opposed to sending all that money outside to other places. And reusables, again, when implemented successfully, result in less waste for communities to manage. So there's a reduced cost there, especially in communities where waste management infrastructure is not super well established. And there's a real burden on individuals and the government to figure out how to deal with waste that's getting created. Reuse can be better for people. Reuse can actually be a much better experience for eating and drinking delicious food than eating out of junky plastic or other types of not very nice containers. It can reduce people's exposure to chemicals of concern. Reuse systems are labor intensive, which is good, actually. It creates good local jobs, and these are jobs that can often be done by people in the community who may be from at-risk populations or come from disadvantaged backgrounds, so people that really benefit from having access to good local jobs that they might have a hard time accessing otherwise. Again, depending on how a reuse system is set up, there can be a role for collectors, for people who are motivated to collect items that might have been discarded by someone who wasn't paying attention, and get reimbursed for an amount, for picking that item up and bringing it back into the system. And I think ideally, we see reuse systems as being a fabric that can actually connect communities together. And it can build a sense of community identity or reflect a community's identity that already is established, and just become a point of connection within the community that can be really beneficial for people. And I think the environmental benefits are probably the ones you think of first, because often that's how we get into a conversation about reuse, but we certainly know that reuse can help manage litter and pollution, can reduce the amount of toxic emissions associated with the creation of items and also with the use and disposal of those items. So lots of reasons to be excited about reuse systems. I'll pause because I know, depending on how many conversations you've had in your life about reuse, if any of this that I'm speaking to, I'm hoping that I'll be clear in how I explain everything, but if anything is not clear, or if you have questions, please feel free to throw questions in the chat, and we'll certainly answer all questions at some point as well. I'll try to get through some of the slides first, because often the questions you have I'm about to answer, but I want to make sure no one's feeling confused if I'm using terms that are not familiar, or if it's just if I'm going too fast. So just flag me down if that is helpful. So when we think about reuse systems, we think about 2 different contexts where reuse can happen. Closed loop systems are places where the items are not leaving the premises. So it could be a stadium, it could be a music venue, it could be a school cafeteria. These are places that all of the items are being filled with food, used, and then, recaptured within a single building or campus, or, place where things are not really leaving. Open loop systems are more like what we think of as sort of to-go, take-out, delivery things today. So it might be you get a cup of coffee or boba tea, and then you take it and you walk around, you take it home, you drive around in your car, you get on the bus. So these are items of foodware that are being received in one part of town and then probably being transported around town before they end up somewhere. And so obviously the goal in an open loop system is to have very convenient receptacles to recapture all of those items so that they stay in the loop and they don't get lost out of the loop into your cabinet at home or into the environment or into the trash. And so in both of these contexts, there's been tremendous innovation and work being done over the last many years, but especially the last sort of 3 to 5 years of businesses working on technology, on systems, on assets. There's a lot of work that's been done to develop these systems. You can see in the open loop context, we've identified over 75 different programs just in the US and Europe right now that are operating at some level of scale to provide people and businesses with reusable foodware solutions. Right now, this is like a very diverse space. There's a lot of different companies trying a lot of different things. And that's been really wonderful because we've gotten a chance to learn a lot about how different systems can work. And it's created a lot of examples of, unfortunately, of what doesn't work. And that's something that we, I think, are all benefiting from learning about, but we're really hoping that it can be examples of how to do this right in the future. So before I go too much further, I did want to explain sort of how we think about how a reuse system would work for businesses and for community members. So this is a circle. So theoretically, you can start anywhere in the circle, but I like to start in the little pop-out bubble that has the gold star on it, which is when businesses, so these are restaurants or food service business or retailers that have to-go food, anyone who's putting food or drinks into packages on their location, they would be provided with reusable items. So these could be cups, they could be containers, they could be soup bowls, whatever the reusable item would be. When their customers come in and order something, the businesses would serve them their food and drinks in those items. And at that moment, that's when the businesses would incur a low per use fee for every reusable that they serve to a customer or container. So you can have everything stocked for, without having to pay for it yet. There's no inventory cost to you. And you don't have to buy anything. So this is really a service model. So businesses would, as you use it, so as you hand out a cup, you pay 10 cents, 15 cents, some fee to be determined of exactly what that number is, but something that's going to be in the range of probably what you're used to paying for a disposable cup or container as you give it to a consumer. And so that's how these items get checked out. There's different types of checkout processes, and that's part of what the design process is for. It's figuring out what is the checkout process that works best for businesses and for customers. Once customers have this item, and actually I skipped this important detail up here, which is reusables. It's really important that reusables be available and accessible to everyone. And what we think that means is that they need to be cost neutral to use for anyone in the community as long as that person returns the item. So that means that you don't have to pay to use a reuse system. You just have to be able to return the item within the time allowed so that you don't get charged the cost of the item. So that's sort of a key principle that we think is important. But again, as we go through sort of this community design process, this is something that the community will have a lot of say in, is that what's the right way to do this. Once people are done with their food or drinks, they check the item back into the system so they can avoid being charged for it. And there would be return bins conveniently located all around town so that returning something is very easy. And then this is where the service piece comes in. So to make this whole model work, you need a service provider who's going to pick up the reusable items and transport them to a washing facility where they get washed, sanitized, inspected, and then repacked. And then we're back where we started with restocking the items to businesses. So that's the general flow of how this works. And I just was checking the chat. It looks like there's no open questions, so I will continue ahead. So to make this really real, because I think that's also really helpful when we're talking about something that's not really a familiar system to what most of us have experienced in our lifetimes. I wanted to share a couple of pictures from businesses and companies that are doing this now, at least at some level of scale. And we'll talk about why scale is so important. But these are a few examples of things that are currently happening. So Tim Hortons, and I don't know if this is a familiar name to everyone, I like to think of them as the Dunkin' Donuts of Canada. They are doing a pilot in Vancouver with reusable coffee cups, and they're partnering with Sharewares as well as Return It, which is another reuse service provider. And you can see here they've got, this is what their cup looks like. It's just like their branded paper cup, except it's made out of, I think, polypropylene in this context. And this is what their return bin looks like. So you pick up a flap and you can dump your extra drink in this middle kind of container here, and then you can put your reusable cup in and you check it back in, and then you're good to go. In this case, they're actually using a deposit model. So you pay $4 Canadian to check out the cup, and then you get your $4 Canadian back when you scan the cup back in. So that's one example of how this is working today. Another example of a system that's currently in action is in New York City. Deliver Zero is a company that is partnered with, well, they are like an Uber Eats, for example. So you can order from your favorite restaurants through them, and they'll get the food packed into their containers, which are plastic, as you can see here. It gets packed up, and then it gets delivered to your home, and then you return them at a later point. So that's just another example from New York City. They've gotten, it's a decent level of scale. They've got about 80 different restaurant partners that they're working with in New York City right now, which is a lot, though maybe not a lot for New York City. And then another example to share is coming from the US, and I believe this is the San Francisco Bay Area. Dispatch Goods, and they're using stainless steel containers, which you can see here on the left. And they have a couple different versions of business models that they're working on, but they do a lot of the delivery models as well as takeout. And they've also done some B2B stuff, so moving produce and vegetables in reusable containers as well. So I think it's really helpful just to sort of say, look, this is real. It's not a total magical fantasy, but as I mentioned before, I think what we see an opportunity for is to say, it's great that this innovation is happening, these systems are popping up in lots of different places. So we know the technology exists, we know that it's possible to do this, but it still doesn't tell us what it should look like in Hilo. And it doesn't tell us how to design a system that really works at a scale where we know that the community will get the full benefits of a reuse system. And so one thing that we've learned looking at many, many different reuse systems around the world is that scale is really important. And in order to get a reuse system that is really unlocking the environmental benefits, it's really unlocking the economic benefits, and providing the number of jobs that you would hope for and the behavior change that you really want, it's important to have the full system in place. And so reuse really does work best when you have the whole ecosystem in place. And what that looks like is many, and ideally even most restaurants are offering at least one reusable item so that everywhere people go, it's part of their habit. They're able to access items, and ideally it's the default. So they're not having to ask for it. They have to ask for something different. Having collection bins, washing infrastructure, and logistics in place so that they're everywhere that you would want them to be, the collection bins in particular. Having really clear and consistent signage and behavioral cues for users, and then also having really high volumes of items moving through the system so that you're able to really keep the cost low and reduce the environmental impacts of the system. So this is all, again, as we think about, well, what would this mean for Hilo? How would this work? And so when we think about a community that has a reusable foodware system at scale, what we picture, and this is sort of a generic template picture, which every city can put their own specific vision onto. But what we imagine a model where reusable foodware is available everywhere. People are able to access it where they want to in a way that works for them, return it where they want to in a way that works for them. And the behind the scenes service is being operated in a way that is good for people, good for the environment, and good for the community. So that's what we think is possible. Now, what's really important in all of this is how to design a system that really makes sense for a community. And obviously here, we're thinking closely about Hilo. And so when we think about what does it take to set something like this up, we think a lot about how do you start with enough data and enough of the people on the ground saying, okay, this is a good idea. This is a good place to be. So we start with this mapping and engagement phase where we say, is there interest? You know, are there local partners who would really like to lead this work? Because Perpetual is here to support, but this isn't something that we can do on our own, right? This is something that the community has to want to do and be excited about, and there have to be people who are willing to lead the work. And I think we have a strong yes in these areas. So the third piece then of sort of moving to the design phases is can we get a baseline of some of the key the kind of data points on the waste landscape, and you know, what does the litter landscape look like today? And so we have a partner who helps us with something called the Circularity Assessment Protocol. It's Dr. Jenna Jambeck's lab, the Circularity Informatics Lab at the University of Georgia, does this protocol where they come into a community and they talk to lots of people and they do litter transacts, and they basically sort of create this picture of what do things look like today and what are the opportunities to create a more circular model. And this is a really great starting point for reuse systems as sort of a place to start. But really, so once we've sort of said, okay, we think there's interest, we know that there's a lot of potential for a system in a place like Hilo. What we do next is we go into community design workshops. And what that means is we facilitate a series of conversations with people, and this is what we're here to talk about with this group today. And we're really excited to have all of you here to get your input, is we really want to hear from you the best way to hold community design workshops that will help us get all the right voices into the conversation and really understand what the community needs and would like to see. So really we're focused just right here, community design workshops. Now, once we've gone through this process, there's a lot of other things that we can go on to do. And there are ways that Perpetual can help with that. There are ways that Zero Waste Hawai'i Island will help with that. And I imagine there will be roles for many of the organizations in this call and on this conversation. A big part of what we try to do is integrate and identify as much of what already exists in the community to build on top of and build with, as opposed to, you know, duplicating or replicating things that already exist. So in the interest of time, I won't go into like too much detail on this slide because I'm excited to get into our breakout groups and really talk with everyone about community engagement and how we can do that the right way to sort of really start this process in the right way. But I want you to know that the community design workshops are being held knowing that if we do get alignment and excitement and a kind of a clear vision from the community, we are prepared and equipped to follow this process through all the way through to launching a system in Hilo that can support the community for many years. So there's a lot of things that would go into that, and a lot of ways that we can bring resource and support into that process. But we're doing this not as just, well, this could be interesting, let's check it out, but we're really bringing to this process we think there could be really something very positive for the community. And if the community can set a course that you're excited about, we can support that process, you know, through to full realization of the dream. When we think about design, we really think about ensuring that the system works from an economic perspective. First and foremost, it has to be self-sustaining over time. Otherwise, it doesn't do anyone very much good. It has to be better than disposables. It can't be worse. That's the whole point, is to design something that is going to be better for the environment. And it's not automatically true. It's actually surprisingly easy to design a reuse system that is not better than for the environment. But the good news is there's a lot of ways to design reuse systems that are better. It has to work from a technical perspective. It has to be seamless and frictionless for users and for restaurants. It has to, you know, people have to be really confident in the quality of the washing. It has to feel really efficient and safe and good. And it has to work for everybody. And we need to make sure that that no one is left out of benefiting from the system. That's a really important piece of how this needs to work. So what Perpetual can do, and I think this is, I've sort of alluded to this along the way, but the reason that we're here to support this process is we can bring a certain amount of technical expertise. Our team member who's not here today, Dagny Tucker, has actually operated reuse cup systems before, so she has a lot of that on the ground experience. We're here to help mobilize funding to actually get infrastructure set up and to help cover transition costs for businesses. We can help bring the right reuse service providers to town to help with some of those technical pieces, and we can also help cultivate local talent and local resources so that the system can really be, to the extent possible, owned and run and operated by local people, which I think is really important. We provide on-the-ground support for setup and launch, to really making sure that everything goes smoothly. And part of what we are excited about is every time we can help a community do this, it becomes an example for other cities to follow, and we can help create the resources to make that easy and fun for other cities to look at the example of what a Hilo or someone else might do, and be able to be inspired from that to build their own process. We have a number of different partners across our 4 cities. So we have Zero Waste Hawai'i Island here. We have other partners in our other cities. I've already mentioned a couple of our academic partners. We're working with Jenna Jambeck and her team. We have at the Data Science Institute, we have resources for geospatial analysis and mapping. And University of Michigan is our LCA partner. So they help us with life cycle assessment and modeling to make sure that even before a system has been put in place, we know from a life cycle perspective that it will be better than disposable alternatives. And we also partner with US EPA Trash Free Waters Program, as well as PR3, which is an organization working on standards for reuse. And so that's a really important piece of this as well, making sure that any sort of reuse system that gets set up here could be interoperable with reuse systems getting set up elsewhere, so that over time, as reuse becomes just the way that we all do business everywhere, all these systems talk to each other and are interoperable. I want to make sure, okay, this is probably feeling a little repetitive. There's a lot that of support that we bring. I won't go through this in detail. I'll just say we're excited to support the process with all of the technical aspects that we can bring. But really what matters in this process is what the community is inspired to create, and the ways that we can support that process. And so I'm going to, I guess the last thing I'll talk about before we get into some of the community workshop stuff is we do have some existing funders. We are currently funded by the Overbrook Foundation, the 11th Hour Project, Walmart.org, which is the foundation, not the company, and then Plastic Solutions Fund, which is actually a coalition of funders, all seeking solutions to plastic waste. And we have a couple of pending proposals that we're super excited about, even though who knows what the odds are of actually securing some of this funding. But we were really excited to work with Hawaii County to submit a SWIFR grant for reuse infrastructure funding. We've also submitted a reuse outreach and education grant. And we have some additional multiple foundation grants pending, which would just bring resource into this process to make sure that the work can get done and can get done well, by the people who are best positioned to do it. So I wanted to give you just a glimpse of some of the work that we've done in Galveston. We did a set of community workshops in Galveston back in March, so at the beginning of last month. Over the course of a couple of days, we held some community drop-in workshops. We did a business breakfast workshop, and we did a lunch workshop for NGOs and community groups. And these were really fun events. We had really great turnout and really great participation. You can see part of what we did is we had cups from different reuse service providers around the country right now. And people, when they came in to participate in the workshop, they would borrow a cup as they came in, and they could choose. So we have some cups from our cup here. These are Vessel stainless steel cups, and it's hard to see, but there's some additional black cups over here from Trashless in Austin. And then people could have iced tea or water or lemonade or fruit punch. And then they walked around and they answered different questions, either by voting in these little glass jars, or you can see we had papers with stickers. And so people could put their answers on stickers depending on how they felt, how they wanted to respond to each different question. So this just gives you a feel for what this looked like in Galveston. We had people, coming through, providing their votes, having conversations, giving us lots of input. A really great reception. Actually, people were super excited, especially kids. Kids had so much fun going through and putting the answers in the jars and everything. And we had some really great conversations. So I just wanted to share that that's what we've done in Galveston, and some of the things that I think we think of as what are sort of the fundamentals of community engagement. And I say this just as sort of a level setting for what we are thinking about in this context are, before you even start designing the workshops, making sure that we get community members involved in designing the workshops, that the community is the best people to design workshops for the community. and really thinking about spreading the word in all the different relevant languages and getting the word out through many different ways, and different types of media. We want to make it really easy for people to attend workshops. So holding workshops in public spaces with good transport options, using different times of the day, different days of the week, making sure that childcare and food are available to everyone, and providing stipends for community members who need it. And then making sure that at the workshops, they're really interactive and experiential, that there's a lot of different ways for people to provide their input, and that we provide both in-person and online opportunities for people to participate. So I think that's more than enough talking from me at this point, and we're really excited actually to talk to all of you. So I'm going to, in just a few minutes, we're going to split into a couple different breakout groups, and here's what we would like to do. Actually, so before we do this, if there are any clarifying questions or just things people want to say or ask about, I don't see anything in this chat, so maybe everything is clear, but if there's anything that people want to ask about or are curious about, this would be a great moment to ask.
Kelly, this is Doug Adams from County of
Hi,
Hawaii.
Doug. Thanks.
I saw the variety of organizations and participants from Galveston and community workshops, but I didn't notice whether the city itself was involved.
Yes. So the city of Galveston, we have the full support of the mayor and the city council. They weren't involved in designing the workshops per se, but they have been very supportive of the process that we're going through and are very excited about the prospect of the system. And we've coordinated closely with the folks in the Economic Development Office, as well as the Solid Waste Management and sort of Recycling Office. So those are the folks that have been most closely involved in Galveston. And I think what we're finding from city to city is that so in Ann Arbor, right now, we are working on planning the community workshops that are going to be held in Ann Arbor at the end of May. And we've got a very different level of involvement from the government folks there. So we've had the Office of Sustainability as well as the Office of Public Works are like copy editing the invitation language and, looking over the invitation lists and helping, using their social media to get the word out. So I think it really depends on what is feasible and what level of engagement is of interest to the government. Obviously, we want to work in close coordination and collaboration, but I think some government offices just have more time and resources to put towards the day-to-day process compared to just being involved at a higher level. Does that answer your question?
It does. Thank you.
Awesome. Other questions? Awesome. So as we, I'm really excited about the group that has showed up today to talk with us, and we would really like to take advantage of your insight and experience as we think about what could work well in Hilo for community workshops, which we're thinking could happen sometime, over the summer. That's the general timeline that we're thinking about. And so what we'd like to ask people to do, if you're game, is think about a time that you've been part of some sort of community driven process. It could be a community design workshop, if that's something that you've experienced, or it could be another kind of community engagement experience. And think about what you really enjoyed or what you found really worked well in that experience. And we just love to hear about that in our discussion groups. I think there's a lot of details that obviously go into making things like this be successful. And we're really mindful that sometimes, the best way to do it is just to think about what has worked in the past, what felt really good to people, what felt really positive and productive, where people felt really heard. And then let's look for sort of what were the common threads there. So we'll ask you to spend a few minutes doing that. And then one thing that we're finding in the other cities where we're working is that local business people are incredibly busy, and they're also incredibly important to this process. And so we're interested in whatever advice or ideas this community has for what's the best way to work with local businesses so that we can make sure that we are getting the input we need from them to understand what their needs are and how a reuse system would work best for them, while being respectful of their time and the fact that, it's a lot to ask of people to spend time, on something like this. So those are our two questions for the discussion in the breakout groups. In just a moment, you'll have a pop-up box on your screen. I'm actually going to stop the recording so that we don't record the breakout groups, because I'm not even sure how that would work. And I think that we will break into groups. And so in your group, I would say take a minute to introduce yourselves to your other group mates. If you haven't, if these are people, even if you know them, I got a chance to. So yeah, really pleased to have a chance to report back. And then we have a couple of poll questions for you before we let you go. In terms of just sharing a little bit of the discussion from the breakout groups, I'm happy to do a quick recap from the conversation that I was in, but I'm also invite any other people in that conversation to share your own thoughts. So what we heard from our group is, and I won't be able to recap everything, but things that just kind of summarize, really important to have not just larger groups get together, but also small groups, and that it can be helpful to do a series of conversations where you get feedback. And then as you go through it, you can share one group's feedback. You can sort of share what you've heard along the way. And that is helpful to people to sort of hear, oh, that's what that group said. That's interesting. That makes sense to me, or I would see it differently. So sort of having a progressive process, I thought was really interesting. We just talked about how important it is to have a lot of local connections in this work. So maybe having local food, when you offer food at the workshops, and thinking about how you can really, connect into buy local efforts. We talked a lot about just how it seems like this will really resonate with the Hilo community, given the love of Aina. I'm still learning Hawaiian phrases, so apologies if I'm saying anything wrong, but I think I understand the meaning. And I think there was just a lot of good energy around this. Seems like something that people could really get excited about, get on board with, and that it could be a really good fit for businesses as well as for the community. So anything that I didn't say from anyone in my group that you just want to speak up and say something in your own words? Okay, it was a great discussion. Christina, do you want to share out a little bit from your conversation? Don't forget to unmute.
I did mute myself that time, so I don't feel like the muting was my fault on that one. But I think we would have loved to have more time, but we started to have a great discussion. Sierra was saying how she used to be part of a bus that was called Firefly, and it used to kind of move around the US providing coffee for people, but it would also help people move around the community and move to other locations. And I think that that's a great reminder that we can't really have truly accessible and equitable events if people can't get to them. And so really making sure that we have ways for community members to actually come to the events and participate, or for people that can't get to the events, alternative ways for them to participate. Tish was talking about some of the work that she's done with Kukua Harvest, and talking about how, sometimes the things that are challenging, like there's, fire ants when you're trying to harvest things, which we have fire ants here and they're awful as well. That is actually, you're kind of bringing like-minded people together, and that maybe some way in the challenge you can actually, it helps strengthen the community. And then Katrina was talking about, working with a neighborhood group in Portland that, identifies resources and assets that are within a community, and identifies skill sets, like someone that's a bicycle repair or someone that's a builder, and help create connections and share resources. And I think that's a great reminder that as we, build a system, and as we build reusable systems in Hilo, it's nice to remember that there are already systems within the community that are working, and what is the best way to kind of tap into those. And thank you. Now, Ellie, you're on mute.
Yep, I did that myself. All right, Jennifer?
Yeah, great. Thank you. We had some discussion around maybe looking at some longer term engagement in the community rather than just having single events. I think that doing events is going to target a certain group of the population, maybe people that are already aware and care and interested in giving feedback. But as we know, in Hilo and island-wide, we really have a lot of people that are struggling economically, struggling with mental health issues. And so maybe reaching out to organizations that work with those demographics would be a good way to get input on how we design a system that would work for them. Also working with student voices with schools, both at the university and under, what do you call non-university grade school, I guess, and high schools. And then also for business interactions, maybe the larger hotels might already be on board. A lot of tourists might already be on board with, doing things differently in a way that's going to be more environmentally friendly, but going door to door for outreach to businesses in particular, and maybe even to families, would be a way to get input from those people that are not going to show up to a community design workshop. And if anyone else from our group wants to share something I missed.
Very good. Well, this was a good first step. I feel like, obviously this is just the beginning, but really appreciate all of you spending time with us today and starting this process, here. And hopefully, yeah, I love all the ideas that we got. So what we'd like to do to kind of wrap up this conversation is have you respond to 2 poll questions that we put together. One of them is just trying to get a handle on when it works best for people to have events. And I think this can be sort of interpreted as both for you, but also in general, if we're going to be thinking about when to be doing events, put in everything. So the first 2 questions are multiple choice. So you should hopefully see questions popping up on your screen already. And one is about days of the week and one is about times of the day. So just putting in your thoughts on kind of which days tend to be best for getting together for a workshop or for meetings, and then what times of day tend to work best for folks. And then the next question is really for you specifically. We would love to know how you would like to stay involved in this process. And again, you can tell us 1 or more options. So you can just say, well, just keep me on your email list. You can say, please come, if you have a group that you want us to talk to, or you have an event that's coming up. If you would like to really be involved in this process, wonderful. We would love to have you participate. And if there's some other way that you'd like to be involved, we're also interested in that. So please take a moment to fill in your responses to these questions. And we really appreciate your taking time for this input.
I think I saw a question from Lori that I thought was significant as well, that there wasn't weekends listed. Is that by design? Because some people are more available on the weekends, a community might be, I don't know.
That's a good question. I don't think that we were intentional about leaving it off, I think is what I'll say. So yeah, if you think that weekends would be best, I don't know the best way to do that here, but we will definitely keep it in mind. So vote on what's available for the moment, and we'll know that weekends should also be considered. Thank you for calling that out. So as you submit your votes, and I just want to say, I want to say thank you for everyone who came and spent time with us today. We're super excited to be working with Jennifer and Ellen and Devin and Kule, and hopefully many of you to support this process. And I think you know how to reach Jennifer, if not us. We'd really love to hear from you. So please reach out, keep in touch. If you let us know how you want to be involved, we will follow up in that way for sure. But feel free to reach out at any time with other thoughts or ideas. And Jennifer, is there anything else that you wanted to say before we close out?
No, just thank you everyone for coming today and giving your feedback. It's really helpful.
Ellen, any words? No, you're good. Okay.
Good. Mahalo.
All right. Well, have a wonderful rest of your day, everyone. I hope it's a beautiful day, and we really appreciate seeing you. Take good care.